How did your journey of becoming a Muslim sort of started? Like, what's really inspired you?
I always had a belief in God, but Christianity didn't really resonate with me. In middle school, we had a token lesson on, I've realized years later it was on Islam, this religion that accepted Jesus, but as a human being, as a messenger of God, but still human. That resonated with me. That made sense, even at that age.
Joining us this morning in the studio, inshallah, Paul Salahuddin Armstrong, the Association of British Muslim Managing Director.
How did you start learning about Islam?
The thing that drew me to Islam was the actual book, the Quran itself, and the way it laid things out. It made more sense to me. I actually asked for a sign because I'm logical, quite scientific, and as much as the Quran was impressing me, give me something I know is definitely from you. You know, I woke up the following day, all my doubts were gone, and I had answers to my questions. Literally, I woke up the following morning and I'm like, no one can do that except God.
What happened after 2001? Like 9/11 happened. The world sort of, changed after that.
That I found quite a shock. And when I saw that, they're saying Muslims did this? Why would Muslims do that? If you take one life, it's like you killed all of humanity. This is insane. You need a very, very good reason within Islam to take someone's life. Unless your life is at risk itself and you do it in self-defense, or unless you are genuinely fighting in a proper army of your government, protecting your country, that's it. Other than that, you're not supposed to be taking anybody's life. You're supposed to be trying to save people's lives.
There's a lot of hatred towards Muslim were coming. Like, instead of it was going down, we feel like it was just started growing a lot more.
I think you're believing Muslim, maybe not that well educated on Islam. I think this is another factor as well, because for me, I could never do those things. Why? Once I knew the basics of Islam, I know life is sacred. They don't know. They're getting their Islam from TikTok, and in those days it would have been Facebook. Of course, what kind of Islam are you going to have?
Why do you think the rise of extremism in the UK?
There's different factors. One of them is certainly...
Paul, thank you so much for taking the time out. I think we met, I don't remember exactly, but probably in 2019, right?
I think so. It was a few years ago.
Yeah.
Google, wasn't it?
Yes. I think, we went to the Google office for some meeting or something.
Yeah, I remember.
And I think you were doing like a really fascinating work, again, not in one vertical, but you have a lot of hats which you wear, So before we dive into your core work, which is the Association of British Muslim as an organization which you are sort of heading, maybe if we go a little bit back and try to learn a little bit about who you are and how did you sort of convert to Islam and your initial sort of journey. So maybe talk to me a little bit about your childhood. So you were born and bred in UK, right?
Yeah, Talha, I was born and bred in Redditch, and from typically English ancestry as far as I'm aware. And of course, there is no pure English as such, because that means a bit of Anglo-Saxon, a bit of Norman, a bit of Viking, maybe a bit of Irish in there, maybe a bit of Welsh, bit of Scottish. This is how English people are. We're kind of quite an interesting background. But yeah, in that typical English. And I grew up in Redditch, and to a sort of nominally Church of England family, but we were not like religious. And I say nominally Church of England in a very sort of cultural sense, because we never went to church unless the school took us to church or there was some particular reason for an event or something. I didn't go to church. I was never baptized. That's why I say to people these days, I was never really a Christian. Because some people make that assumption. It's in some communities, people, they just sort of like assume religion, that if your parents are from a certain background, they're Christians or Catholics or Muslims. I never really had that. I was just allowed to be and allowed to discover by my parents. My parents had kind of lapsed themselves from that kind of formal religion. Believers in God. But, they were open-minded.
They were not practicing, really. Okay.
Free thinkers, but not free thinkers in an atheist way, but definitely free thinkers. And we used to talk about all sorts of things. My dad was a bit of a philosopher. So he used to have some interesting conversations. I miss my dad. And my mum too. My mum's very interested in all sorts of things. So I grew up in that kind of a typically fairly English environment.
And also the environment around you, was it like very English, or was it like more of a multicultural at that time?
Oh, Redditch was, there was a few people from other backgrounds. So there was just a few Pakistani or Indian background families in the area, a few British black families. That was about it. It was mostly fairly typically English. So it was quite a revelation to me when I went to university and went to Wolverhampton. And of course, Wolverhampton's diverse. And the university population itself was people from all sorts of backgrounds, people from Asian heritages, also increasingly these days Chinese, but there was some there then too. And, then Kurdish people, Arab people, and all these different shops that were available there. And I actually loved it. I loved the cultural diversity because I found it interesting, which is probably one of the reasons I stuck around the West Midlands.
And then when you were growing up, like what was the plan at that time? Like what do you want to do like professionally and like generally, when you grow up?
Well, when I was at school, I was always interested in the environment. So I went to university to study ecology and environmental science. I was originally planning to go into something in that area, maybe a conservationist or someone working on an environmental issue or something, Didn't have it very specific, but I had a rough idea I wanted to go into things like that. I was very good at science at school. And I got a double A in my GCSE, and I also carried on to A level with geography, which is not really a science, but there's an aspect of science to it as well. And that's why it sort of led on to the environmental science. But yeah, I mean, we start off on a course, and lives take different directions as we learn and as we grow. So if you'd have told me then what I'd be doing now, I'd have laughed. I wouldn't have expected it. But that's life.
And then what was the perception about like Muslims and generally the minorities when you were growing up? Because on this trip, I've talked to a lot of Pakistanis as well. And especially back then, and I mean like probably like still now as well. I think the racism and Islamophobia is sort of start emerging again. But like when you were growing up, because you were on the other side.
Yeah.
So what was your sort of perception of the Muslims?
There wasn't one, to be honest. Certainly within the community I grew up in. I mean, where I grew up in Redditch, just around the corner from my parents' house, was a shop that was... the shortened form of Pakistani that's not very respectful. People called it that shop. I didn't, but there were people in the neighborhood who did. And I didn't know anything else, about, any of these things back then. I was a child, growing up. But my parents always taught me it doesn't matter where you're from, what color you are, what your background is. There's good and bad people. And to always treat people with respect unless they give you good reason not to. My dad was friends with the shopkeeper. His name was Chaz, or so I thought for many years. Until many years later, I realized his name was Zulfikar. And he was actually a Muslim. I remember I went back to the shop many years later and I said, Salaam alaikum. And he was, what? Salaam alaikum. He says, how come you're salaming me? I said, I've been Muslim for a few years. I said, I just realized you were.
And then how did your journey of becoming a Muslim sort of started? Like what's really inspired you? Because you, I think, reverted before 2000. Obviously, there are people like after the 9/11, there is like a separate, sort of story. But like what really happened from, let's say, 95 to 2000?
Well, I always had a belief in God, but Christianity didn't really resonate with me. It was... I want to put this in the best possible way because I certainly don't want to offend my Christian brothers and sisters. But the idea of someone who passed away 2,000 years ago and you have to believe in that one particular human being with some very unusual beliefs about them. And if you don't believe that, then that's it. It doesn't matter what you do in life, doesn't matter how good you are. And I'm not saying all Christians take it to quite that extent, but certainly some do. I found that to be extraordinary, and it didn't make sense. If God is this benevolent, loving God, which even the Christians say he is, why would God put so much emphasis on that, on a person that maybe there are still, even today, many people in the world who haven't heard about him or don't know much about his life? It didn't make sense to me. There was actually in middle school, we had a token lesson on, I've realized years later it was on Islam. I tended to switch off in RE class at school because it was mandatory and it was usually about Christianity. And like I said, it wasn't resonating with me. So we had this token lesson for the national curriculum, they have to, on what must have been Islam, because they said there's this other religion we're going to discuss today. And in this religion, they also believe in the same people in the Bible and also Jesus. And they believe he was just a human being and he was a messenger of God. And they believe in someone else called Muhammad. And they have a book called the Quran. And I'm like, oh, makes sense. I asked the teacher afterwards, I says, Mrs. McLaren, can you tell me more about this religion? I'm very curious.
And what was your age?
Oh, gosh, it was middle school. I must have been, I don't even know if I was a teen at that age. I was maybe 11 or 12 or something. Quite young, but this made sense to me. Like the first time in RE class for a long time, my ears perked up and I'm like, oh, that's different. And I asked Mrs. McLaren about it, who was the RE teacher. Sorry, RE means religious education. And she said, what do you want to know, Paul? I said, I'm curious. She said, what do you need to know that for? She said, what's the religion of your family? I said, I don't know. We don't really practice any religion. She said, no, really? What's your religion? She didn't get it. She says, you're a Christian, aren't you? You don't need to know. I says, well, why did you just teach it? And she says, well, we have to do these things because it's for those people who need it or something. I forgot what she said. But I took in Quran and that there was this religion that accepted Jesus, but as a human being. A great human being, as a messenger of God, but still human. God is God. Human beings are human beings. That resonated with me. That made sense, even at that age. And I always was a bit curious about this book, the Quran, but it wasn't until I went to university and somebody passed me one that then I actually started reading it. And that was later,
And then how did you start learning about Islam, like after that? So that was your sort of first experience in your teenagers. Because again, at that time, there was no YouTube or Google where you just go and like...
I wasn't aware of any mosques in Redditch. I think there was. But it looked like a house and it was in the town centre. It was discreet. The community was small in Redditch. I came into Islam because of the theology of it. It resonated with me. So it was like the community I connected with more later on after I became a Muslim. But the thing that drew me to Islam was the actual book, the Quran itself, and the way it laid things out in a way that made more sense to me. And the first translation I read was the Marmaduke Pictorial translation of the Quran, which is odd because I tried reading a New International Version of the Bible, which was in plain English. I used to think the reason that I couldn't read the Bible was because it was in the King James Version. It's just like very ye olde English. Even the New International Version, at that time, I kept trying. I'd read a bit and it just wasn't going anywhere. And then when I was at university, I took that Bible with me, and then somebody gave me a Quran, and I kept them in a shoebox in my student halls. And I kept bringing out the Bible, bring out the Quran, I'd sit there reading it for ages. And then Muslims put me off.
Okay.
But I kept reading it. And so
like
it was
what do you mean by
before...
Muslims put you off? In your uni time?
Yeah, there was, for instance, there was a few young, I assume in British Pakistanis because they were in the area and that they fitted the description. I saw them running off with my stuff. They robbed some stuff from my student halls when I nipped to the toilet and forgot to lock my room for a minute. That didn't give me a very good impression.
And that was the time when you were reading Quran as well. And then you were looking at these British Pakistanis and you were like, okay, what's really is happening?
And then there was another incident that happened after that. It's like there was one mosque that I used to go to occasionally just to, they invited me to some like talks with the community that they had. And they were quite friendly and welcoming. But then there was another mosque that visited, and I just like, they were building it at the time. It's now purpose built. And I was just curious what they were doing, and I wanted to ask how it's going, and, just as general interest. And someone said to me, in something in Urdu I didn't understand, but the gestures were very obvious. So I got fed up after that. I thought, I'm not interested in this. I actually crossed Islam off. I'm like, no, I'm not interested. But I kept reading the Quran. And for a while after that, I used to visit a Gurdwara. And lots of things I liked about the Sikhs and about the Gurdwara, the way they welcome everybody. If you want a cup of tea, you want some food, believe in God. They don't try and pressure anybody, but if you want to learn more, they will help you. And then it was during that time, it slowly started to dawn on me that all the things I liked about Sikhism were also in Islam. But the Sikhs were doing it better. And I still, to this day, I give them credit for that. They do some things very well. And we have to give credit where credit's due,
And then what really happened in early 2000, that when you decided that, okay, I now like formally sort of, converted or reverted to Islam?
I actually asked for a sign because I'm logical, quite scientific. And as much as the Quran was impressing me, I said, it's a book. Allah, I prayed in the Gurdwara. I said, this is a book. I like what I'm reading, but how do I know it's divine? At the end of the day, it's ink printed on paper. I don't know for sure this is from you. I said, can you give me a sign, something I know is definitely from you, and I cannot possibly mistake for anything else? People have always asked me what was the sign. I said, that was the sign I asked for. I gave a description. If I could mistake it for anything else, how do I know it's from Allah? I said, there's no point, I said, give me something I know is definitely from you. I woke up the following day, all my doubts were gone. And I had answers to my questions.
Sorry, all of your?
Doubts. And I had answers to my questions. Literally, I woke up the following morning and I'm like, no one can do that except God. And it was a long time after that before I really started to get questions again. It's like there's something that was given to me that just like, I can't explain any other way. It was just like, because I know how I was before that. I know how I was confused. I was wondering. And then this happened. And I'm like, no, that's an answer to my prayers. That's why, irrespective how much sometimes I've got irritated by certain groups of Muslims and questioned certain things about how some people practice Islam, I couldn't leave it because I've had that experience. And that is something which is just remarkable. I mean, I don't know, maybe some psychiatrists can or psychologists can explain it in some other way, but I certainly can't.
And that was the moment you sort of decided that now I want to sort of officially, convert.
Yeah, it was, I'd already made the decision, but then I met, these kind of narrow-minded kind of Muslim types. I met one of those and I said, I told you you're a Muslim, you should convert. And I'm like, I put it off, but I couldn't put it off any longer than a week. Literally a week later. But I actually asked a few of my friends, I said, I've heard that you can embrace Islam with just a minimum of 3 witnesses. So I actually embraced Islam with the minimum of 3 witnesses at the back of a chemist shop. I did not want any kind of like publicity or anything. It was just, so I'm right with God. And I just wanted to do it that way. I thought I would avoid all of the hype, all of the thing. But you know what? I say Allah has the best sense of humor. Because, literally every mosque I went into for about 6 months after that, oh, mashallah, assalamu alaikum, you're Muslim. And everybody comes up to me and gives me a hug. And I was like, oh my goodness. This is what I was trying to avoid. It's from my personal journey. It's not, I never came into Islam because I wanted any big fuss made or because I wanted to lead anyone or even teach anyone about Islam. I mean, I've fallen into it, but I came into this because it was something I needed for my own journey, for my own understanding.
And then what happened after 2001, like 9/11 happened? The world sort of, changed after that.
That I found quite a shock because,
obviously,
the Islam that I embraced, and when I saw that, they're saying Muslims did this. Why would Muslims do that? If you take one life, it's like you killed all of humanity. This is insane.
But how did that then impacted your decision and your thought process? Like, was there a bit of a doubt or something, or
it made me question things. I thought, where did they get this from? Who are these people? because I had no real, I mean, I know you had like, you heard about plane hijackings and stuff in the 80s, but it wasn't framed as a Muslim thing. It was framed as these groups of rebels or these groups of Palestinian liberation people or something like that. It was not framed as Muslim. But then after 9/11, certain people tried to frame this as Islam. And we cannot deny that, Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Boko Haram and all of these groups, they themselves claim they are following Islam. We can't deny they claim to have some association with Islam. It's not the Islam I follow. I'm sure it's not the Islam you follow, or many of the people tuning into this. But we cannot deny that. Some people try to say, "Oh, they're not Muslims. It's nothing to do with us." Well, explain how they're quoting Quran and Hadith, and maybe we completely misquoted, with misunderstanding in a very weird way. But we can't deny the fact that that's what they're claiming.
But then, how did the 9/11 overall, the impact of 9/11 impacted you personally, like your own personal journey?
There's a couple of things it did. First, it created a concern in my parents because they wondered, what has my son become? Are you going to become a terrorist? And my brother had also embraced Islam 6 months after me. So it was like they got very worried about that. But for me, it caused me to go like really deep in researching Islam. Understanding, have I understood Islam correctly? Where are these people getting this stuff from? Also, I had people from groups like Al-Muhajirun that were giving me leaflets and trying to recruit me. And I used to give them back to them with, notes and stuff and saying, have you checked this in the Quran? That's just like very small part of a verse. Read the ones before and after. It's not meaning what you're saying. I didn't know at the time I was de-radicalizing them. But that's actually what I was doing. All I was doing was like questioning it and saying, well, hang on a minute, where did you get this from? Because the thing is, I knew the Islam that I embraced, it's a journey. I mean, there's a community aspect to it as well, but really it's a personal journey of the soul back towards God. And, you do that through working on yourself and becoming a better person, developing that relationship with God and also with the human beings. So if we follow that kind of Islam, then surely we should become a better person. No one's perfect. It takes time and it's a lifelong process. But obviously, that's completely different to what these people are promoting and teaching.
And what really happened, so let's say if we talk about the early 2000 till 2010, 7/7 bombing happened. A lot of things happened in UK.
They did, yeah.
And generally the radicalization sort of increased a lot. Obviously, one reason was the Afghanistan and the Iraq war, and a lot of things were happening globally in the Muslim countries. But how do you see, because again, you were from the other side as well, and then you also worked with the Muslim community. If you zoom out, the organizations like Al-Muhajirun, and there are a lot of other as well here, and then obviously the rise of ISIS here.
Yeah.
What really happened in the UK, especially in the British, in the Muslim community?
Well, I think firstly, there isn't a Muslim community in the UK. There are multiple Muslim communities in the UK. Some of them are more sort of diaspora based. Some of them are more theologically based, or like you've got Deobandis and Brovis. That's been brought here as well.
You say it's more of a tribe specifically.
And so you've got there's so many different Muslim communities in the UK, and you've also got a kind of British Islam kind of coming together again. There was a British Islam in the UK actually in 1889 when the Association of British Muslims was founded, long before all of these diaspora communities came here. But now you're also getting that starting to happen again with a mixture of young people, converts, people from different backgrounds and heritages. But they're coming together around a sense that, well, we're British and we're Muslims. So that's happening as well. But it's more like a matrix of different communities. It's not like one Muslim community. And I'm always conscious of that when people ask me to speak on behalf of the Muslim community. I'm saying, well, I can't speak on behalf of the Muslim community.
You're like, which one?
I can share what I understand. I can talk about the people that I know, or if you want me, about those communities which I know about, I can share something. I said, but I can't speak on behalf of all the Muslims of Britain because you're going to have as many different opinions as there are Muslims,
But why do you think the rise of extremism in the UK? What are some of the main factors you feel like?
There's different factors. I mean, one of them is certainly a disenfranchisement some people feel with the society. Maybe partly that's triggered by racism, partly triggered by foreign policy, partly triggered by anti-Muslim prejudice. And of course, when people have these triggers and it causes them to disassociate a bit from society. Also, this assumption somehow, because of, thanks to groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all these terrorist attacks, the assumption that some people now have that Muslims are either terrorists or maybe more prone to terrorism or that. If you're constantly put through that lens every day, I mean, what's that going to do to you, especially maybe a young person who's just growing up? They just want to grow up and be left alone and just get on with their school and then go to college, do whatever they do, and not always be put under that lens. I mean, it must be really traumatic for people if that's what they're experiencing.
And then, how do you see then the rise of ISIS? Do you think that was also sort of connected with the same reasons, or was there, what was happening also from the government side as well, as a British society? Why there's a lot of hatred towards Muslim were coming, instead of it was going down, we feel like it was just started growing a lot more.
I think, every time, I mean, this has actually been borne out by, for instance, Tal Mama, who collect statistics on these things. Every time there's a terrorist attack, there's a spike in anti-Muslim prejudice, which is kind of understandable as a human reaction. You would expect that to be the case. And then you've kind of got the background amount. The background amount is probably not as bad as what it maybe is in some parts of the world. But of course, when you get those spikes, then some of the things that can happen, and then you get crazy people wanting to burn Qurans or something, either here or in other European countries. And that triggers people even more. And of course, I mean, if you're, a believing Muslim, maybe not that well educated on Islam, I think this is another factor as well, because for me, I could never do those things. Why? Once I knew the basics of Islam, I know life is sacred. You need a very, very good reason within Islam to take someone's life. And basically, unless your life is at risk itself and you do it in self-defense, or unless you are genuinely fighting in an army that is a proper army of your government protecting your country, okay, in those cases, it comes with the territory. But that's it. Other than that, you're not supposed to be taking anybody's life. You're supposed to be trying to save people's lives and help people, and whoever they are, whether they are Muslims or any faith. So it's like, if people know that, and they also know that the Prophet taught that you mustn't go to extremes in religion because that will destroy you, then how can you be an extremist? But there is a lot of people out there, they don't read books. They don't read Quran properly, certainly not in a language they can understand, even if they were taught how to recite it. They don't read other books. They don't read the books of classical scholars like, Imam al-Ghazali or Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jalani or people like this. They don't know. They're getting their Islam from TikTok, and in those days it would have been Facebook. But if you're only getting Islam from social media and these little sound bites and some radical people that have made a career out of themselves, promoting videos on whichever social network happens to be popular at the time, then, of course, I mean, what kind of Islam are you going to have? And it's the same not just with Islam. I mean, there were radical Christian groups in a similar way in some other countries. And ignorance plays a huge part in this. Islam began with Iqra, to read, because Allah taught through the use of the pen, taught you that which you didn't know. I mean, it's such an invitation to actually get some books out, learn, try to improve your knowledge. And if we have knowledge, if we have understanding, then you're less likely to be prone to radical messages. And I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. There are also some people that are surprisingly well educated that have been drawn into these groups. But I think in general, you're going to be less prone.
What do you think, what is the main reason of far right in UK? Now we have seen the Reform Party and a lot of other things are happening. Recently, I also had a discussion with Hamza Yousif, the First Minister ex-minister of Scotland, and he also, I think, given a statement a few months back that I don't feel very safe and comfortable in UK, and I'm not sure if my wife and I want to live here anymore. And especially as a first minister, if you're saying that, that's just like a really big statement. So how do you see all of this?
I think there's two things here as well, because a lot of people just lazily say far right. Reform's more of a populist party, but then of course you've got other groups that are real far right, and there's a difference, because I mean, there's a difference between people who are patriots, who maybe even if they're coming quite strong against immigration and things like that, but they're patriots and they don't necessarily hate people of another background, and people that actually hate everybody who's not white and English. I mean, there's a difference here. But both popularism and the far right have grown in response to certain factors, certain stimuli. And we can't understand them and why that's happening without understanding that these things are happening. And there's a lot of disenfranchisement. Some of the disenfranchisement comes from like traditional working class towns that are across this country. They used to have mining, like coal mining or steel work foundries. They used to work in these, very hardworking, but these kind of industries. That all shut down. So you ended up with people that instead of being working class were then like not even working class anymore. And they didn't have that income they used to have. They didn't know how to transition into like the new market and the way that the society is changing and what you needed to do. Nobody was guiding them that you need to go to college and university and get certain things. Some people were, but it's not enough. There were a lot of people that have been left behind. Now, of course, if you've been left behind like that, and then you see another group of people that have come from somewhere else, recent immigrants, they're doing better for themselves. But that's one trigger. Then if you see they're not just doing better for themselves, but they seem to be taking over. They're building their own institutions, their mosques, their other kinds of places, and starting to run things. And then they're demanding things change. It's like there's some people here who actually they want all our meat to be halal. They go too far. It's like, I'm not saying people who just say halal meat should be available, which it is, but there's some people, they want all the meat in the school to be halal. They want special kitchen or something. I'm not saying they're the majority, but they exist. And of course, far right people and other popularists also, they hear about this.
Plus, that's their own country,
and they're saying, this is England. Yeah. What are you doing? You can't come here and telling us how to. I mean, you imagine if I went to Pakistan and I started setting up chip shops everywhere and saying everybody must eat fish and chips and, stop all these curries and things. And I mean, if you try and change things like that, or say, let's ban shawakamis and we should all wear suits or T-shirts and things. People are, well, I don't even wear shawakamis, but now I'm going to wear them because how dare you come into my country and start demanding this? You have to have respect for the local culture and the way things are. And also, I mean, when there's this economic disparity, something should have been done to actually level up. And that's why, also in the political discourse over the past 5, maybe up to 10 years, there's been this conversation about leveling up. But it's a conversation. In real terms, there's not been near enough leveling up. And so, people get disenfranchised. They get upset by that. Then when you hear of there's been these grooming gangs where, young girls have been raped, and then they find out, I mean, in reality, I don't think it is a case where it is predominantly people of South Asian descent who are involved in this. But it came up in the media that a lot of cases where these grooming gangs that have been raping young girls were made with South Asian men, and people saw that. They know about that. And there was a bit of a cover-up at first. Things were tried not to be put in the media and stuff. That got people even more agitated and upset. And you ended up with people like this Tommy Robinson that started emphasizing these things. So when you understand that, you can see why there's a rise in populism and a rise in the far right. And it is deeply worrying. And this should be managed. I mean, especially in regards to the more extreme elements. I mean, that really needs to be managed.
And what do you think, what is the role of government in all of this? What do you think the British government should be doing right now? to make this a bit more better for both sides, for the Islamists as well as for the right or the left wingers?
Well, I think first and foremost, where there are real issues, those real issues need to be addressed. Because there are some things that have been raised, irrespective, even if the far right raises an issue. But if that issue is based on something that's real, even if the way they present it is not 100%, but 50% or 30% of that, there is something there. If you ignore that, if you try to cover it up, if you try and push it in the background, people get more upset about it and more angry. They get angry with their country, they get angry with other groups. It's a normal human reaction. So those issues need to be addressed, discussed. And if there is something that can be done to make things better, that needs to be done. There have been numerous failings in this country where things haven't been addressed as they should have done. This grooming gangs thing that I just mentioned, there were cases back in the 60s. Imagine if the initial cases had been dealt with properly, with stiff sentences under the law to make an example. Firstly, I mean, how many young girls that have been raped and abused, they would have been okay. They would never have gone through that. They would have been safe from ever experiencing that because these things were dealt with before they grew into something big.
But do you think what was the reason? Like, was there not enough evidence, or why was the government not doing it?
You know, I had a very concerning conversation with someone from a CTU. I'm not going to drop her name out of, because it was in confidence. But
CTU is counterterrorism.
Counterterrorism unit officer some years ago. And she asked me for advice on this, what they should do. And I said, really, you know these people? Do you have evidence? Oh, you have all the evidence. I said, have you arrested them? No, because we don't want to be seen as racist. I said, are you kidding me? This is a crime. I says, do you think that, normal law-abiding British Asian people want to see these people out in the streets if that's what they're doing? And you can guarantee if they're abusing white girls, they're going to be abusing Asian girls. And I have it on, good authority from people in the community. They've told me exactly that. I mean, obviously, an abuser's an abuser. They're not going to, just abuse one and not the other. It might be a bit more hushed up if it's within a certain background. But it's, I was just shocked. I know of cases that go back decades, and if they'd have been dealt with at that time, maybe this would never have been such a big problem as it's become. But it wasn't.
In your Islamic learning and when you were learning about Islam, when I was reading about you on your website and like other articles, I think you were also in contact with Sheikh Nazim and Sheikh Hamza Yousif from US. What did you learn from these two personalities?
Firstly, Sheikh Hamza Yousif, when I was very early into investigating Islam, and he was one of the people who really got me to think about it, because he could explain Islam in plain English in a way where he could make connections between our society, our culture here in the West, philosophies that our society is built upon, and connect that with things within Islam and explain it in a way that makes sense. It's very, very different from what other people were telling me. But the more I learned, the more I realized it was based on things and it was making sense.
Did you get a chance to meet him?
I have actually met him. I haven't really sat down properly with him, but I have met him on occasion. Maulana Sheikh Nazim, I never met in person, but I am connected to him through about half a dozen of his authorized representatives and teachers. So, I take a lot from Maulana Sheikh Nazim as a result of that. And Maulana Sheikh Nazim, he taught things in he cut to the chase. He cut all of the nonsense out the way. What it is really about. It's about, working on yourself, becoming a better person, connecting with God. Connecting with God so your heart fills with light and not darkness. So in other words, so you become a more loving, caring, decent human being. That really resonates with me. And, I think this is one of the things that, and maybe another reason why you get some people drawn into other paths, they're not taught this. If they were taught that and understand that that is really essential to Islam. I mean, even within the Salafi tradition, or al-hadith, as you call it in Pakistan, they call it tazkiyah an-nafs. This struggle with the nafs, this struggle with your ego, your inner demons. This is really essential to Islam. And I mean, the Prophet even called it greatest jihad, the greatest struggle. So it's like, really, that's vital. That's really important.
And can you talk to me a little bit about your work with the Association of British Muslim? So that's basically, for the people who don't know, that's one of the oldest British Muslim organization, I think, which was founded roughly in 1890.
It's founded in 1889.
Wow.
By Shaykh Islam Abdullah Quilliam. He was called William Henry Quilliam before he embraced Islam. And he was a Manx solicitor based in Liverpool who converted to Islam. He established a mosque up there. The mosque afterwards passed out of use and become like a hall of records or something. But I think another organization has bought it since.
That's also one of the oldest mosques.
Yeah, it is actually one of the oldest mosques. But it hasn't been continually in use, unfortunately, because it passed back to the council, become a hall of records or something.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the Association of British Muslims? So that's, people who don't know, that's one of the oldest organization of the for the British Muslims. I think which was founded in end of 1800. And that's one of the oldest. And so what's the organization about, and what is your role there?
The Association of British Muslims was founded in 1889 by Shaykh al-Islam Abdullah Quilliam. He embraced Islam in the late 1800s. His original name was William Henry Quilliam, and he was a Manx solicitor living in Liverpool. He founded a mosque there. I think it was originally called the Muslim Church. So again, he used things in a way to try to like localize it and to help people understand. And they used to have like hymns and things that were, like in Pakistan you have nasheeds and naats, but they were English hymns, but to the Prophet, about the Prophet and about Allah in a very English way. I think that's a beautiful approach. But the Association of British Muslims was also founded about that time. It's been going ever since, so under different people. We're not the largest organization of Muslims in the UK, but we're certainly the oldest. And we have the most interesting heritage. We're made up of people from all different backgrounds who feel a connection with Britain. So it's not just for converts like myself, it's also for people who have come from the diaspora communities and settled here, and now they're feeling British. And they're part of the society.
And then when did you join the organization, and what is your role right now?
I originally joined about 15 years ago as an interfaith advisor to Sheikh Rosser Owen. And within about a year or so, he advised me to become the co-director along with my colleague, Mohammed Abbasi. And we gradually started to build it back up again and develop it. I'm now the managing director since about, I think, 5 years ago. Sheikh Dawood actually passed over basically his role as Amir. He passed it to me after I'd basically been his apprenticeship for around 10 years. And I take the kind of a lead and direction in the organization. Now I've stepped back a bit, and we have a board of directors, and I'm working with them to see what they come up with, and if they've got any better ideas than me, how we can develop this organization further and reach out. We have been involved in organizing events, putting information out online about Islam, also discussing issues, promoting free speech, because we think it's important that as a Muslim organization that we do that. And people shouldn't feel afraid of having conversations that are much needed, even if they are a bit controversial at times. And there's not really any other Muslim organization, I think, in the UK that's really pushing that direction at the moment.
And then what's your role at the University of Birmingham? Because you're doing very interesting work there as well. And then someone also told me, I think one of the oldest Quran manuscripts are also there, right?
Yes, for the past 5 years, I've been a Muslim chaplain at the University of Birmingham. For those unfamiliar with the terminology, any minister of religion at a university or a school or a college that's not a traditional church or mosque or something is called a chaplain in England. And then they just preface it with the particular religion. So effectively, I'm an imam, but they like to use the terminology Muslim chaplain. And basically that role is to support the staff and the students of the university. It's partly spiritually, if they need information about the religion or support in that area. Partly it's just counseling, if like they have some of the things they need to discuss and a trusted person. Sometimes the person who comes to me might not be Muslim. And my role as a Muslim chaplain is not to say, oh, great, I can convert them. It's to support them, and whether they're Christian or Hindu or another faith. And if there's something I can do there and then to help them, I will do that. If it's something a bit more detailed and technical or something more that they need their own chaplain for, what I will do is I do what I can for them there, and I'll put them in touch with the Christian or Jewish or Hindu chaplain, whoever can help them further. And it's really beautiful. We work together as a nice team, and support each other. Also, the university has one of the oldest Quran manuscripts in the world. And it's amazing because this has actually been scientifically proven by Oxford University in 2014.
It's one of the oldest.
One of the oldest.
Wow.
Because the parchment upon which it's written was carbon dated to the late 6th or early 7th century, which means it's literally, and that's with a 95.4% accuracy. So this is really very accurate. We know that parchment comes from the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him.
And is it a full Quran or just like few
It's a few pages that come from it. I've read about it, and they reckon that some of the other pages from the Quran may be in France. I forgot the exact place, but they've got some of that are written exactly the same scripts, and they've matched it up. But I mean, those particular pages that we have, they're part of the Mingana collection, which was collected by Alfonso Mingana back in the late 18th and early 19th century. And then they become part of the Cadbury Library at the university.
Lastly, what would be your advice to the young Muslims, especially the youngsters, whether from a Pakistani background or a British or like any other, part, but like, what would be your like a general advice to them?
General advice to young people, keep your mind open, work hard, try not to be too drawn into particular narratives unless you've researched further and checked the facts. Don't just jump to conclusions. It's very important. There's actually a verse in the Quran which very clearly says this, that if someone gives you a report of something, do not just act upon it before checking it, because otherwise you might do something you regret later. And this is advice from Allah. And for sure, it's the best advice. And it's something which I have seen numerous occasions. And young people tend to be, they get excited about things. Sometimes excited, sometimes upset, depending on what it is, and can act a bit too quickly. And I respect and love the passion, but we've got to take a step back and just check first, because otherwise we can do something that could really have big implications on our lives or on our careers. And it can affect us in numerous different ways, depending on what it is. So try to take a step back and assess everything carefully before you make big decisions.
Paul, thank you so much for taking the time out. It's always lovely talking to you, but thank you for coming today.
Thank you for inviting me.